There is something hovering in the atmosphere, invisible and impalpable but with a suffocating intensity. Curiously, most people seem indifferent to it, or perhaps prefer to ignore it. We walk the streets as if we were shadows of ourselves, connected to devices, immersed in our obligations, and yet with a growing emptiness in our chests. We smile at events, talk about our achievements, share images of a perfect everyday life, but something inside us is rotting. In a world where we are free to consume, change our appearance, alter our lifestyle, and even reinvent our identity, the feeling of freedom has not brought peace. On the contrary, sadness has become deeper. The relentless pursuit of productivity has become a burden. We are so used to the fear of failure that the terror of living without purpose haunts many. Loneliness has become a silent epidemic, a heavy burden carried by everyone, but which few recognize. Anxiety, once rare, now seems the norm. This is not a passing phase or an aspect of modern life. It is a silent reality, camouflaged under the facade of a society that refuses to see. Children being treated with drugs at an early age because they can't concentrate. Adults unable to spend minutes without the anxiety of a new notification. Couples who share a life but grow apart emotionally by choosing the silence of screens. The neighbor who suddenly loses control. The woman who leaves the city in search of peace in the countryside, tired of the hustle and bustle. These are not isolated cases but signs. Signs of a system that is mentally ill. Not as an exception, but as a reality that affects everyone. A collective psychosis that goes beyond the confines of hospitals and spreads through social networks. Unbridled consumerism, the constant fear of being forgotten, and hysteria disguised as intense debates. What we are experiencing is not just an outburst, but an attempt to understand a growing phenomenon. Over the next few moments, we will explore the layers of the collective mind, challenge established notions, and try to understand. How were we driven mad without realizing it? What drove us to this point? And even more importantly, is there a way out of this spiral? Prepare yourself, because what lies ahead may not be easy, but it may be the start of a real transformation. There is a type of suffering that doesn't require words. It enters silently, without fanfare, but with insidious force. You go about your routine, pay the bills, send messages, make plans for the future, and yet there is something in you that remains incomplete. A gap that success, affection, or likes can't fill. This pain has no clear cause, but it eats away at everything around it. This emptiness is not something personal. It is part of something bigger. It's a reflection of the times we live in. Curiously, this emptiness arises from something we call a conquest. Freedom. Erich Fromm, in his work Escape from Freedom, already warned us. Modern man has freed himself from traditional authority, but this freedom has only brought him confusion and loneliness, entangling him in a sea of insecurity and anxiety. Freed from the traditions, communities, and beliefs that once gave the world meaning, man now lives in a space where everything seems possible but nothing really matters. Modernity promised a new beginning, but what it brought was profound fragmentation. Freedom has become a tangle of purposeless choices. Without solid foundations, we have given ourselves over to consumption, the incessant search for productivity, and the obsession with performance. If you don't know who you are, at least you can show off what you have or how much you suffer. Pain has become the new currency of exchange. And this is no coincidence. By breaking with the pillars that supported the collective unconscious, such as religion, traditions, and feelings of belonging, we have entered an era of isolation, where individuals find themselves disconnected from their own roots. Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, warned us. Modern man doesn't realize the fragility of his reason, nor how dependent he is on the invisible structures that give life meaning. Without these foundations, he becomes part of an amorphous mass that doesn't think, only reacts. It is in this soil of insecurity and confusion that the collective psychosis begins to take shape. The irony is obvious. We have never been so connected to each other, but at the same time, we have never been so distant. Information is at our fingertips, but wisdom is rare. Choices abound, but direction is practically non-existent. Contemporary spirituality comes down to algorithms. The new confessional is the digital platform. The new altar is the image reflected in the mirror. And when everything becomes too fluid, identity, truth, values, human beings don't mature. It disappears. This is the process we are experiencing, a dissolution of our very essence. What we are witnessing is a silent transformation, a disappearance of the true human essence. What was once the I now gives way to a fragile, disconnected figure, eager for recognition from others. A constant search for something to fill this empty space. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived one of the greatest horrors in history, shared his vision of the modern human condition. The emptiness that characterizes the existence of many is not caused by physical pain, but by a deep abyss in the soul. The human being needs meaning like the body needs food, and when that meaning is taken away, the consequence is spiritual illness. People live a tireless search for fulfillment. They buy, consume excessively, follow fads and gurus, and yet they remain hungry. An invisible slavery takes hold of their minds. It's not the body that is imprisoned, but the mind. Ideas, beliefs, and aspirations are shaped by external forces that silently influence their decisions. The most intriguing thing is that while this is happening, the victim convinces themselves that they are free. Nowadays, people's minds, saturated with information but lacking direction, have become a breeding ground for manipulation. It's not through wars, but through strategically designed narratives, carefully thought-out images, catchphrases, and campaigns. Edward Bernays, considered the father of public relations, had a clear perspective on the issue. He believed that influencing the habits and thoughts of the masses was an essential factor in the functioning of modern society. And he didn't do it naively, but with a deep understanding of human psychology. When the human mind finds itself lost, without a direction, it looks for someone or something to guide it, and whoever controls the tools that shape collective thought has the power to dominate the masses. This concept has been adopted by many regimes, but also by the marketing, political, and media industries. George Orwell said that control of the past guarantees control of the future, and that whoever controls the present controls history. But Aldous Huxley, with his futuristic vision, saw an even more insidious reality. What if control wasn't imposed by pain but by pleasure? What if individuals were conditioned not by restriction but by the constant supply of entertainment and distraction? And that's exactly what we're experiencing now. Distraction as a tool of power. There's no need to imprison bodies when the mind is already captive to quick clips, superficial content, and instant rewards. What we see in digital life, seemingly chaotic and meaningless, is actually an ingeniously designed conditioning machine. The flow of data, the curation done by algorithms, aims to reinforce the vices of the human mind. Look at the apps we use. They are designed to create a constant need for feedback, notifications, likes, endless scrolling. It's not a coincidence. It's behavioral science. Tristan Harris, a former Google designer, has exposed the techniques used to manipulate the human mind, taking advantage of our deepest psychological vulnerabilities. In addition, language, which has always been the bridge between thought and reality, has also been taken over. Words now function as networks that shape the way we see the world. By changing a society's vocabulary, we change its way of interpreting reality. The transformation of language, as described by Orwell with the term nova lingua, is not limited to a simple change of vocabulary. It is a distortion that seeks to stifle the complexity of thought and suppress dissent. Today, this is reflected in the control over what we can and cannot say, the replacement of common terms with euphemisms disguised as ideologies, and the confusion between concepts that are fundamental to our understanding of the world. And the impact of this on individuals? They lose the ability to think deeply, to reflect and question clearly. The mind becomes fragmented, and what was unique blends with what is mass-produced. Convictions become recycled, copied, simple reflections of what is heard in the media. Revolt, indignation, and displeasure are projected onto us through bombastic headlines and manipulative videos. Emotions are orchestrated, guided by short videos and catchy phrases. None of this is accidental. It's all planned. Behind this manipulation, control over human minds is more profitable, more predictable, and ultimately more controllable. But few stop to realize the crucial component of this equation. For this manipulation to be sustained, it depends on one vital thing: fear. Fear of being different, fear of being excluded, fear of being at odds with the masses, of being labeled wrong or radical. The line between having a firm opinion and being the victim of a collective illusion is a thin one. When an entire society crosses that line at the same time, what once seemed insane becomes the accepted norm. Madness becomes everyday reality. The most alarming thing is that all of this often starts with apparently good intentions. To protect, to correct injustices, to build a more equitable world. However, history reveals that the greatest horrors have often masqueraded as virtue. Matthias Desmet, psychologist and author of The Psychology of Totalitarianism, observes how an anxious and isolated population clings to a collective narrative, not because it is true, but because it offers a sense of belonging. When objective reality is set aside, belief in the stories created does not disappear. On the contrary, it intensifies. People don't stop believing. They believe in anything. This process is not new, but it has been documented in detail by Desmet, and the key to understanding its dynamics lies in fear. Fear disorganizes rational thought. It not only paralyzes but shifts responsibility away from the individual. This is why, in periods of crisis, extreme ideologies and mass movements grow so easily. Fear, in its purest form, feeds obedience. Gustave Le Bon, in The Psychology of Crowds, wrote that crowds never seek the truth. They seek illusion, and without these illusions they cannot survive. When the collective lie gains strength, the truth becomes an act of heresy. Doubt becomes treason. Debate becomes a threat. The group creates its own rules, its own dogmas, and imposes its own way of seeing the world. Anyone who dares to question, challenge, or think for themselves is severely punished. History offers concrete examples of this. In 1930s Germany, one of the most educated and cultured societies in the world was seduced by a narrative of racial purity. Artists, academics, doctors all joined a system of ideas that defended the absurd. In the United States, during the period of McCarthyism, one word, one assumption was enough to destroy a career. The logic was simple. Anyone who doesn't toe the line is an enemy. Today, instead of uniforms, we have algorithms and posts. Collective delirium is now spread by hashtags, validated by likes, propagated by viral videos. Social control no longer needs physical chains. Control now happens in the palm of our hand. While the world continues to unfold before our eyes, the tension between control and freedom, between truth and illusion, grows every day. What once seemed distant is now on our doorstep. The freedom we were promised is now showing itself in its many facets. The freedom to choose, to consume, but also the freedom to be shaped by invisible forces. With every choice, every click, we are somehow reinforcing the invisible chains that hold us prisoner. And the scariest thing is that, unlike physical chains, these chains of the mind don't bind us visibly. They hide in the distractions, the empty promises, the perfect images that bombard us every second. What is presented to us as freedom is actually a camouflaged prison, but there is something we can do. The first step is to recognize the game, to see the shadows behind the bright reflections. The human mind still has immense power to free itself, to break out of the vicious cycle and seek the truth that has been hidden from us for so long. We need to question what is imposed on us, not just accept what is given to us as truth. We need to recover our ability to think independently, to look beyond the screens and see what is really in front of us. The fight is not against external forces, but against the fragility of our own minds, against the ideas that imprison us and shape our destiny. It is possible to wake up from this illusion. And when we do, there will be no more room for the manipulators, for those who seek to keep us blind. Awakening is not just a necessity, it's a right to be truly free. Change begins now. Every questioning thought, every gesture of resistance is a small flame lit against the darkness. We can no longer wait for the answers to come from outside. The answer is within us, waiting to be heard. The path to freedom is an internal journey, and it begins with a simple decision: to choose to see the truth no matter how uncomfortable it may be, and then we will truly be free.